I recently came out with a treatise called In Defense of the Mind. In Defense of the Mind is a treatise on the philosophy of mind and is a defense against various schools of philosophy such as materialism and determinism in the philosophy of mind. And one of the ideas that this book features is one of the theories that I am most proud of that I have formulated, and it's called infinite potentiality. It can be summarized in the following way. You have your first statement, which is the idea that we are bound by the physical world, so we're bound by physical laws. So if you pound on a table with your fist, the table isn't going anywhere, the table is therefore solid. You have your second statement, which is the idea of cultural determinism or cultural relativism, depending on how you look at it, which is the idea that we are bound by our social norms, we are bound and governed by our social reality, and there's no way out of that because people can essentially decide what kind of person we become and the like. And so the third statement would naturally involve the mind, and you might be wondering where this would leave the mind. Well, this is how I come to my conclusion of infinite potentiality. I basically say that because we are limited by the physical world and because we are limited by the social world, this puts all of the pressure on the mind. And because this puts all of the pressure on the mind, we have to believe that the mind is therefore free. And this is a reason to in fact believe that the mind is free. Now, there are problems with this idea, but I'm not worried about that for the moment. What I want to describe right now is the idea of the mind as being able to conceive of what I call infinite potentialities or an infinity of potentiality and possibility. So you could look at each possibility in the mind as representative of a state of being of a quantum particle. So in quantum mechanics, there is this idea called superposition. And superposition is this idea where a quantum particle can exist in multiple states of being at the same time. And so I kind of see ideas as working this way. And basically the reason why I put all of the emphasis on the mind, because we're limited by the physical world and we're limited by the social world, is because the mind can conceive of whatever it wants and can therefore act on the physical world and act on the social world and act on the world in general via its ideas and via its infinite potentialities and the things and the ideas in which it can conceive of. Now, it's of course relevant to talk about some of the problems of this theory. It's been criticized heavily by materialists and by determinists, as well as by monists. I have to admit that what I'm propounding is an idea of creation. So I'm basically saying that the mind can be creative cognitively. So the mind can create via cognition. And I think this is an idea that a lot of people don't like. So for instance, I've heard nihilists reject my argument of infinite potentialities. I've heard monists, who only believe that there's one substance in the world, reject my ideas of infinite potentiality. I've also heard fatalists reject it. And essentially it's because, as I've thought through these ideas, it's because they think that it's too freeing. It's too free of an idea, and there's no way in which we could actually be free. And there's no way our mind could actually be this free. And I think these are valid points, but I think they're missing the point of what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to free the mind from all of the constraints, not create more constraints. As much as I hate to admit this, I think that many of these philosophies, such as materialism, are simply constraints against the various things that the mind can do. And that's one of the ways in which I get frustrated when I'm trying to propound this theory, is because it seems like this idea of mind, of infinite potentiality, always wants to be attacked. And it wants to be attacked because it seems too open and free. And it seems even implausible, but I think to do that is to miss the point. It's more about empowerment, it's more about possibility, and again, to push my thesis further, as I was saying before, it's about creation, and it's about creativity. I would say that infinite potentiality is definitely a powerful idea, to think that the mind is infinite. One of the critiques that has been leveled against my idea of infinite potentiality is the idea that we're omniscient, and that this is essentially omniscience is infinite potentiality. And that's actually not what I'm saying. Infinity and the idea of the infinite is more of a word to describe possibility. Because you see, my philosophy is about possibility. It's about probability. It's about the things that can happen, the things that we haven't dreamed up. And to continue this line of thinking, many people often criticize my idea because they say, they take the Derridian approach, for instance, of the idea that we have building blocks to work from, but those building blocks are finite. And I think to say that is to limit it, to limit what we can do. And I think that that's an argument that a materialist would make, and that's an argument that a materialist would make because they would want to deconstruct and limit what this idea actually means and what it signifies. For me, what it signifies personally is freedom, as I've been saying before. The idea of infinite potentiality is the idea that your mind is not limited, even though the mind is a physical thing. In some aspects, that doesn't mean a materialist can immediately discount the mind and immediately discount infinite potentiality. Because essentially, the mind, what I'm claiming is the mind can think of various things, can think of many things, and I think that's important to keep in mind. I know that all of this is pretty dense and complex in various ways, but just remember that it's this idea of creation, it's the idea of cognitive creation, and it's the idea of creativity via thought. And like I said, for various reasons that I pointed out, this idea is rejected because I think it's our tendency to put constraints and restraints on the various faculties and resources that we have in our mind. And that's something that I try not to do. And just to close, I would say that one of the ways in which my ideas gets conflated is this idea that we think that the mind is the physical. So if the brain is limited, then the mind must therefore be limited. That's a claim that I reject for obvious reasons because it's incompatible with my statements and my arguments. Another idea is something tossed out like physical pain. And so some kind of physical pain would automatically prove that the mind is limited. But that of course misses the point because I'm talking about a very abstract idea. This is a little bit about infinite potentiality, and I hope you enjoyed this talk and look out for my book. This is Phoenix, and thanks.